Good evening. I'm Makiba McCrary, Chief of Learning and Community Engagement, and I'm happy to welcome you to this evening's program in honor of Juneteenth, the oldest nationally observed commemoration of the ending of slavery in the U.S. In tonight's program, panelists will discuss the need for disruption in their industries and their personal stories of seeking and achieving liberation in their careers. This Saturday, June 19th, we invite you to join us for a day of activities and programs to celebrate Juneteenth and honor the contributions of Black artists, scholars, and creative voices to the city of Boston. All events and activities are free and take place in person on the MFA's outdoor campus. We're also pleased to share that admission to the MFA will be free, and tickets are currently available to reserve online at mfa.org. I'd like to thank our generous sponsor. Please join me in acknowledging Chase for making this evening possible. You stepped up and said you believe in us, and for that we are profoundly grateful. You'll now hear from Bina Elliott, Head of Advancing Black Pathways for J.P. Morgan Chase.
We're proud to be celebrating MFA's 9th annual Juneteenth commemoration. It is the oldest nationally recognized commemoration of the ending of slavery in the U.S. We're also glad that we can come together through a series of events in partnership with the MFA this June to honor our communities and the contributions of Black artists, scholars, and creative voices to the city of Boston. We recognize the critical role of MFA in opening minds and shaping our culture. So on behalf of J.P. Morgan Chase, we'd like to extend our deepest thanks to the MFA and the Boston arts community for sharing their creativity with us. We know that brighter days are ahead of us, and it only can happen because of your resiliency and strength. To the city of Boston and to the cultural institutions, I want to thank you and hope you have a great celebration.
I want to welcome everybody to this year's Juneteenth celebration. This is our City Talks version of panel discussion, and I have four incredible individuals with me who I am very pleased to also consider dear friends. I will share with you a little bit about them, and then they will tell you a little bit about their own journeys as well. We have Betty Francisco, who is the CEO of Boston Impact Initiative. We have Dwayne Edwards, who's the founder of Pencil. We have Bethia Carter, who's president and CEO of New England Blacks in Philanthropy. And last but not least, Victor Marca 27 Quinones, artist and co-founder of Street Theory Gallery. And then myself, Makiba McCrary, and I am the Chief of Learning and Community Engagement here at the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. We have decided to talk about disruption. We are going to talk about liberation and creativity. And all of those are really big placeholders for a lot of the work that all four of you have been doing. I probably could count myself in that as well. So I am grateful to have you all out there forging ahead. I would love it if you could just each take a moment, and I'll call you, to talk a little bit about who you are and what you do outside of the title that I just named. And I might start with you, Victor, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. My name is Victor Quinones. I also go by Marca 27. Marca is a word in Spanish that I chose to take on as my graffiti name, an artist name several years ago. Originally from Mexico, but I grew up in the US. We have a saying in Mexico and many parts of Latin America where you say ni de aquí ni de allá. And that basically means neither from here nor there. And it's interesting when you talk about slavery and you talk about immigrants and colonization and all these things, because as an artist, a lot of the work that I do deals with that and deals with identity and also culture and how we can control our own narrative, even on a business side of things, and who we choose to work with, and different people that we choose to amplify and support. I'd say that I think we're all here because we're all on the same page in terms of uplifting our own people and finding any and every way that we can support each other as cultural independent individuals.
Betty, I see you nodding. I know you spend a lot of your time thinking about culture and identity. Do you want to go next and tell folks a little bit about all of the different ways that you're being disruptive?
Sure. Well, so much of what Victor said resonates with me because I'm Chinese and Puerto Rican, and I've spent a lot of time in my life thinking about identity, kind of struggling to figure out who I am, who do I align myself with and identify with. And, it wasn't until college that I finally embraced both cultures, both my Latinidad. My mom is Puerto Rican, originally from New York, and my dad, who's Chinese, originally from Taiwan. But I didn't learn a lot about my Asian culture. And so melding both, right, really understanding what the two bring together has been both a challenge and struggle, but also I would say a sense of freedom when I finally understood that I could be both, that I can embrace the two. And so, I will tell you, disruption for me was really accepting who I am, and then using that as a platform for uplifting other people, for opening doors, for championing Latinos and other people of color, at what I call into positions of power and influence, right? Being able to uh, outline and impact our own destiny so that we can become who we truly were meant to be, and not having all these lines of identity, right? Oftentimes they put us in a box, right? They constrain us. They don't give us the freedom to be really who we are. Like I talk about being Latina and Chino Rican and, but that's not ultimately who I am. I'm an artist. I'm a creator. I'm a creative. I'm an investor. I'm an entrepreneur. I love making things. That's really who I am. And I think that for me is true liberation, being the best that I can be, living the best life that I can, and then bringing others along so that they can also share the same.
That you have a budding artist on your wall. I can see that somebody has added to your decor. And I won't tell all of your story, but you also bring a significant amount of creativity and space from the art world to your work, but also squarely are sort of in this space around finance and philanthropy and social impact and investment into our own Black and Brown communities. So I would love for you to talk about what's your day job? Like, what do you think of yourself as bringing to the work every day?
It's funny when I think about my day job. It's my day job, my night job, my job of who I am, right? The work that I do. Our goal is to really, how do we shift the narrative from focusing from our deficits to really focusing on our assets? We are all born just with amazing assets. And I think becoming a mom to an incredible young woman, and she is really coming into her own as a young woman. There's a certain amount of humanity, creativity, just life that children just burst into the world, and then we slowly and systematically take it away from them. Shut down their voice, we shut down their dance, we shut down their poetry, we shut down their art. We ask them to become serious. We ask them to sit down. We ask them to do all these things that are really shutting down the spirit. And my whole goal is to think through, how do we get back to our honest, authentic, intentional self? What does that mean? When we are in philanthropy, what are we really funding? If we're funding the love of humanity, the love of womankind, the love of our central self, our fluid self, then how does that come in small boxes? How does that come in some sort of small year-to-year outcome? We're asking people to shift their life, their art, their creativity into quarters, into a life that you come back to me over and over and over again to prove that you're worthy of some little penance so that you can be your authentic self. How do we shift that? Because that is not living. That's not humanity. That is not love. That's really control. And what we need to do is figure out, how do we burst through that so everyone can be themselves. And as I think about, how would I introduce myself? What am I? I feel like I'm an artist without a medium. I'm still looking for a medium. Anyone has one? Let me know. I'll try it on. But you know, we all are artists. We all have a certain swag. We all have a certain something that we bring into the world. We all have our spirit. But then we listen to these people, whomever they are. I don't know who actually is curating this language to say, this is art, this is craft. Oh, that, I'm not even sure what that is. And what we have to do is figure out how to not only burst through that, but eliminate that way of thinking. And if I would say, if there's anything that I hope to do in life is to eliminate that limiting way of thinking about self, community, and how we all sit together.
I could not have planned this segue, and Dwayne, I didn't script it, but this has to be the moment when you step in and talk about your path to where you are now, and all of those moments of, I feel like you self-liberated in ways that I've not seen too many other people be able to do.
Yeah, I didn't even know what that word meant. I guess I was just doing it just instinctively, but I mean, every one of you spoke directly to me because, you know, I would say probably for me, first and foremost, I'm a Black man, right? And something I can't take away and something I'm judged on every single day, but then I start to use it as my superpower because I couldn't hide it. I can't remove it, but you have to accept it. And I think for me, it was really when I felt comfortable really understanding that that was power, that I had power, and that no one will take that power, you know, away from me. And so for me growing up, you know, my liberation was just the freedom of creativity, but I hid it. I kind of removed it from public view because I felt it was mine and I didn't think people would understand it. And so I just hid it. I did it to escape where I was, escape the city that was right outside my door. But at the same time, I start to understand that why am I running away from who I truly am, even though I know people won't understand what it is that I'm trying to do. But at the same time, I'm just like, well, let me keep trying. Let me keep being happy doing that. And unfortunately, a lot of Black folks, we don't always celebrate our natural creativity. And a lot of it we're born with. Like we're born with a certain level of confidence, a certain level of swag, a certain level of creativity that we don't always get a chance to celebrate and use. And we have more people that will tell us we can't do it or we shouldn't do it than people who tell us that we can do it and that we should do it, you know, because we all have our issues, we all have our struggles. To me, my issues and struggle was that freedom of letting people understand this is what I wanted to do and not being, sympathetic to. I didn't want people to be sympathetic to me because of my upbringing and where I come from. Where ultimately that just led me to come completely out of who my creative self is, and that really led to understanding my dreams were too small.
Mm.
My dreams are way too small, and I was limiting my potential based on my own thoughts. My own thoughts of what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be and where I wanted to go. I was taking that away from myself, and I saw a lot of that growing up. I saw a lot of that in friends. I saw a lot of that in associates, and ultimately, I didn't want that to be my destiny as well. Whereas that idea of or the quote of a broke artist, right? Like you hear that term, and for me, it's like, no, I'm not going to be broke, right?
Mhm.
There's something I want to do greater than what you can understand, and so therefore, that's when I really start to think about it, is like I need to stop telling people, I need to show people, because if
So
I show people, then it's a much different story.
for context, I'm just going to say, so Dwayne, you're from Inglewood, California originally.
I am.
And you started your career as a designer for a major international brand. Can you tell our audience sort of where that started, where you are now? And then Victor, I actually am going to ask you the same question because interestingly enough, similar origins, and both of you are also sort of took divergent paths to your own freedom, to your own satisfaction. And so I think that would be wonderful to hear that story.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm like you said, Keith, I'm from Inglewood, California. Left side of the map for you guys. Same everything. You know, the hood is the hood. Just doesn't matter where you are. I was that, like I said earlier, I was that kid that just loved to create, but my thing ended up being sneakers and things that go on your feet. That was my mode of transportation. And so I wanted to make sure my mode of transportation was better than everybody else's mode of transportation. And I was blessed enough to get an opportunity to express myself through sneakers at a super young age, at age of 19, turning pro, so to speak, you know, getting my first paycheck. And the revelation was I was the only one there who looked like me. And I could not understand why wasn't there more people who looked like me. And ultimately, throughout my whole career of going from the bottom to the top, there were still not enough people who looked like me. And so what I wanted to do was really walk away from my industry to understand how can I inspire and elevate the people who look like me, because they're just on the other side of the fence buying product versus creating product. So I walked away to create a school I wish I was able to attend and a school I wish I was able to hire from in Pencil. And ultimately, I see myself today as an evolution of starting off as an artist. I evolved into a designer. Now I'm a creative, but I'm also now a farmer, where I feel I'm farming basically the next generation of creative talent, where I went from designing shoes to designing lives. And to me, my whole world comes full circle, because now I have a daughter who wants to be in design, and she's doing it on a high level. She unfortunately has me as a father, because I'm telling her what to do and what not to do. But I really feel my whole journey was for this moment right now, which was to empower her so she can go off and do the amazing things that I know she will do and surpass whatever things I was able to achieve.
Oh, wonderful. Victor, over to you.
First, I want to big up Dwayne, because I've actually worked with some of his students. Sarah Sabino, big up to her. She's a very talented artist and designer, and she's blossoming and did some incredible things with me when I was working at another big corporate footwear brand, and she's moved on to bigger and better things. So there's nothing I could say that, you know, for Dwayne and many of us who have mentored young people, I don't think anything makes us feel any better than to see them just, you know, doing really well and prospering and growing and feeling like you had a little bit of, you know, something to do with that. And of course that's, you know, that's validation more than any stranger can give you, is just seeing what you invest in people and seeing that return on investment in their own lives and how they can support even the next generation beyond all of us. So it's definitely such an important thing that, you know, some of us take on, and I encourage, you know, everybody to do it. You know, if somebody taught you, each one teach one. And that's how, really, that's the answer to all our questions when it comes to is how do we change? You know, we change ourselves first, and we change everybody else around us, and then they keep doing the same.
Yep.
But yeah, it's a special moment. As far as, you know, my connection to the corporate world, I came from an immigrant family. I was born in Mexico, and you know, my parents, you know, they had a limited education, so they did a lot of work that's considered, you know, labor type work. My father at some point had his own body shop, but a lot of, you know, bad things happened in the 80s. ICE is not a new thing. It's been around for decades under different names, under different administrations, but it's always, you know, been systematically trying to tear apart families, you know, since day one, for a lot of people that don't know that. So I grew up with that. And when I received the college, at museum school, I received a scholarship to go there. And that's what brought me to Boston in the first place. And, you know, like most kids, when they go to college, they want to do all the fun stuff. And honestly, I was a, you know, graffiti vandal trying to figure out how to make a living. So I took as many design classes as I could, because I said to myself, I can teach myself how to be an artist, but I can't teach myself all this software and, you know, graphic design and Illustrator and, you know, industrial design, all these things that I can't teach myself, because YouTube wasn't popping back then like it is now. Now you can go to university, YouTube, and learn anything.
Right. Yeah.
But not back then. So I was fortunate enough to get into the apparel industry first. and then did a little stint in the toy industry, which honestly merged together when you think about toys and 3D modeling and rendering and industrial design, and then you think about textiles and apparel. It's a strange way of coming into the footwear industry, which is what I ended up doing in Boston.
Yeah.
And the same thing that Dwayne was saying is the higher up you get into these industries, the less and less of your own people you start to see.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a problem. And when you speak up on it, the voice of reason becomes the voice of treason in these industries. Like people pat you on the back and they thank you for being, the Kaepernick of their industry, but behind your back they're like, oh man, he's not gonna last. They're gonna let that person go, or they're afraid to speak up for themselves because they want to hold on to their position and they don't want to
Yeah.
cause any trouble. So it's definitely rewarding to begin my own journey away from the corporate world. And
Yeah.
I would say that everything has its ups and downs. I definitely learned a tremendous amount of wealth being in that environment for a little over 20 years. And having a partner like my wife's significant other, Liza Quinones, she's had my back since day one, even when I was in the corporate world. And without her, I wouldn't have been able to be independent, start our own agency, work with clients, do our own projects in the fine art world, collaborate with people like the MFA and other organizations. So it's been a tremendous journey. And I would say that Dwayne hit the nail on the head when he said there's just too many people when you're young telling you can't do this. You have to work for somebody. You can't be independent. You need that stability. All these things that make you very insecure and afraid to make your own moves.
Both of you talked about finances. I'm just going to go straight to it, like money, right? And there's not one person on the screen that did not come up. I know all of our stories personally, putting a value next to a dollar. And it changes, it does, it matters, it changes your life. I don't care, nobody can tell me that, it does not feel good to be able to resource your way through choices and decisions. And Betty and Bethia, you both function in a world that is about investment, right? And investment in different ways. But I feel like one thread between both of your work is how we reinvest in ourselves with dollars, with real money, not, with like add a girl or, so proud of you, but like actually here, we're going to value your work and what your contribution is by putting some sort of a dollar sign next to it and saying, here, keep doing it, keep growing it. I have this big question about Juneteenth, which is, and not really just Juneteenth, but it's about this notion of being told that you are now free. Like you've been liberated. That's what happened, right? Somebody showed up and said, you didn't get the memo? You're free now. And I always wonder, and it's maybe kicking back to like my, college days and reading too much Paulo Freire, but like, can somebody give you your freedom? Can somebody else liberate you? And both of you are doing work that I would argue says maybe, but not permanently. The way that you permanently get, find that liberation is that it comes from within. It comes from the community itself. And so I'm going to just open it up to Betty and Bethia to chime in, but all of you could please jump in.
Juneteenth is interesting, right? Because it's exactly how you describe it. Someone showed up 2 years later saying, oh, did you know you're free? And I think about that a lot, right? Especially being ADOS, right? That when you think about these words of someone saying you're free or being enslaved, we often think about freedom as an economic proposition rather than an internal proposition. And how did you, and I have a feeling that emancipation means to set someone free, right? when I liberate you, I give you liberty. But freedom is a state of being free. It's not something you can give me or really take away from me. And we know that from slavery, right? We know that people constantly liberated themselves, emancipated themselves. Even if I'm working on that plantation, you don't own me. I am doing things for my people. I am freeing other people, even sometimes while I am standing there. So I think that space of how can we liberate or how do you emancipate? I think this calls into question what is freedom and what is the freedom that we're speaking of. You know, as I was listening to Victor speak and, you know, telling his story of and being called an immigrant on his own land, right? The United States, people coming here and then taking this land and then telling you, you're an immigrant. You don't belong here. Well, who are you to tell me I don't belong? And who sets up this space to be emancipated from or liberated to? And Juneteenth, I think, is a very interesting time to really think about that liberation, freedom, whatever we want to call it, because you have to remember during this time, white people are celebrating July 4th, right? They're celebrating the independence. And as Frederick Douglass reminded us, whose independence are you celebrating? And as we think about that time, and I think it's similar to today, it goes back to this evaluation and it does bring us back to the money, so to speak, because usually freedom is equated with money. What can I do because I have? What can I buy my way out of or buy my way into, instead of thinking about the spirit of freedom that, as Victor talked about, that allows him to not only create, be, it allows, as Dwayne spoke about his children, it allows him to set forth a legacy that cannot be taken away. And as I think about Juneteenth, it is about that freedom, that legacy of ours that cannot be taken away. No matter how much people complain about hearing about Black Lives Matter, liberation, can we just get over it? Well, I'm multiracial, biracial, whatever it is, you still have to acknowledge what happened here. And it didn't just happen to one of us, it happened to all of us. And, you know, there was a really good article written by a white historian, Kenneth Davis, back in 2015, that talked about Juneteenth and that Juneteenth was for everyone. It's a reminder of the stain that on the United States. We can never be free if we don't acknowledge that stain, because that stain will hold you back. It will hold back our creativity. It will cause us to devalue people. It will cause us to devalue certain artists. It will cause us to devaluate certain communities if we don't deal with that stain. And I think having Juneteenth as a space that we can not only remember, but also think about what is the legacy of this going forward, provides an opportunity to open us up to be our authentic selves. Money is just a conduit, right? Money is nothing. It's basically a conduit to say, I value you, I see you, I sponsor you, because you're buying something else bigger on that other end. And so as we think about how we sponsor, value, bring forth a legacy of what we want to see in the future, I think Juneteenth is a really wonderful time to think about that. And who are we and what made this place? All the things that went into this country to make the United States of America. What does that mean for our legacy going forward? Because if we are not interested in learning how about our freedom, our so-called freedom, or our so-called ways of existing, we can never truly, truly be free. Our monies will be tied to a narrow concept of whiteness, a narrow concept of what we deem privilege, and it will never allow us to grow to be the full entity that we can be, and we can be for our children and our children's children going forward.
I want to talk about disruption, so stay there. How is the Boston Impact Initiative disruptive? Like, how does it make those chits into that mountain?
Yeah, I mean, so Boston Impact Initiative is an impact investing fund, and we invest in regenerative local enterprises in Eastern Massachusetts. These are businesses owned and controlled by entrepreneurs of color or that are serving communities of color. And our ultimate goal is to use financial innovation to close the racial wealth divide. So that's disruptive. One is because we are focusing on the entrepreneurs that are thinking about, how do I have social impact in a world where capitalism is all about maximizing profit. And these entrepreneurs are thinking about how do we maximize other things, right? Like jobs, employee pay, employee ownership, who's leading, who's really in control of power and money, and who makes decisions, right? So part of this work is rethinking capitalism. And I'm not talking about being socialist or or being ultra progressive. It's just about giving people the life that they deserve, right? And when you think about, some of like Victor, you talk about Mexico. In a lot of our Latin American countries, there's this concept of cooperative enterprises, right? Where people own part of the organization, the enterprise. It's not just, wealth accumulating towards one person. And so until we rethink, how do we create impact that benefits everyone, rather than just a few, right? Because that is our model still today, right? How do we maximize shareholder impact wealth? We are not going to move the dial. And so those are, social Boston Impact Initiative is a small chip in the mountain. And we need many, many more funds and organizations like this, right, that are trying to disrupt how investing is done. And you're seeing many more of them. You're also seeing many funds that are being started, led, and controlled by investors of color, right, which is heartening. It's wonderful to see that. But many of them still operate in the same capitalist model, right, of let's maximize wealth for the investors. And until we start to think more broadly about how to maximize wealth and social impact, we won't move the needle as much as we could.
So Betty, there's
sorry.
a valuation proposition to that, right? Because many of us have a 401k. Many of us have an account somewhere that you're looking at your broker, or you're looking at your paycheck, or you're looking at your company and asking, where's my pay raise? And I think, as we think of, I think there are so many things you said that were so wonderful. And one is really thinking, how do we rethink whatever we call poverty? Some people are financially deprived, but they have a wealth of assets, yet we call them, you're impoverished, which means we put a value proposition on them that says you're not worthy. And then there are other people that really and truly need help in building up their assets, right? And we put another valuation on those people to say, yeah, you don't deserve really good schooling because you only can do so much. And I think that value proposition that we place on people and community is the thing that we have to change most. Whether it was the 70s, I guess CalSTRS did the same thing. We keep going on this ebb and flow of investing in communities of colors and disinvesting. Victor mentioned something that is very close and dear to my heart. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. Growing up in the 80s, I knew what the 80s looked like, when they disinvested from Black and white in many communities. But then who did they pour new investments in, and what communities they systematically left behind became two different stories. So as we think about wealth creation, to envision a space and a place where we can all live together, our arts tell that story. Our arts, whether you go to a museum, you see lovely people that are wealthy sitting at a table, a feast. People look at that and think, I want to be that. Whether you look at someone, you go and you look at another painting and you have this very prominent white man standing there on a horse, you know that represents power. And I think we have to help people reimagine what is the community, what is the space that we want to be in, that we want to live in. And I think the arts do that. If you can see it, you can believe it. If you can't see it and you're bombarded with these old master images, then that's what you succumb to. And I think as we even think about our arts going forward, deficits, that's not the mainstay of our communities. Our communities, we are not a people of deficits. And we need to allow more art to come through to show that. Because what we have done in the past, people have co-opted our images, our stories, our narrative to say, y'all a bunch of poor people. Let me just give you a bit of this to help you out. That's not who we are. And we need to not accept that narrative ever, ever again. And it starts with us disrupting our own internal narratives. And then we have a ripple effect that says white people had affirmative action and had it a long time. You systematically took that away from me. I did not come, we were not poor. Tulsa isn't the only Tulsa. There are many places. How do we disrupt that narrative? And that's why I think Juneteenth is amazing, because it is disruptive, and say, this is what I've given you, and this is where we can all go collectively into the future. And I think we really need the arts. And that's why I think I'm just going to be plain. White people preserve their image and legacy through the arts. That's why they pay for it. That's why they're patrons of it. They are putting forth a narrative to say this is our strength and our power into the future. We have to use our arts to do the same thing, to help us imagine and see ourselves into that place that we want to be, just like our parents did for us.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, honestly, because systemic racism, it's rooted in the divide and conquer mentality, even within our own cultures. So when you mentioned earlier about, me being a so-called immigrant in my own land, a lot of people don't know that a majority of the U.S. was Mexico. It was lost during, some wars and some battles that were not that long ago. And if you happen to be on the right side of the line when it was drawn in Texas, Colorado, California, all these huge states that were all Mexico at one point, you were automatically an immigrant, once that line was drawn. So, it is incredibly frustrating. I think education in general should always find a way to implement pre-Columbian history, pre-Columbian art for all cultures, Native American, Black, Asian, because this is a melting pot of cultures, and we should all know what our true heritage is, what our true background is, and we should start decolonizing the school system and also, arts and culture in this country, because the only time our art is celebrated is when it's considered folk art or prehistoric art. It's not celebrated any other time or looked at in high regards unless it was stolen, 1,000 years ago. So it is incredibly frustrating how there's a very tiny window of artists that are celebrated and deemed in high regards. Or if you're a John Biggers, which nobody has ever heard of, he gets celebrated after he passed away, or he was only shown in African American, museums, and not, held in high regards like most artists that, aren't even close to his caliber. So yeah, I agree with you 1,000%. We do need to celebrate, our own heritage, our own history, because really that's what's going to change our personality. That's what's going to give us freedom, is knowing that you come from something greater than what you're being told.
Dwayne, can you jump in? I want you to talk a little bit about what you're up to. Hello Disruptive, as it falls under my umbrella of definition of disruptive.
I mean, being Black and brown in art and design is disruptive within itself without even have to do anything, because
Correct.
it's the normal. It's not the norm, right? And you have the events of last year and George Floyd getting murdered, and all of a sudden Black and brown people are more important than what they were before. But for us, we've always been important, right? But I do believe, though, that we need better self-awareness of our importance. We need better self-awareness of who we are and what we can be. And we need to stop waiting for white people and everyone else to decide for us what's good, what's bad, where we have to do a lot more of that work on our own. We have to uplift ourselves. We have to educate ourselves on our history of creativity, our history of art, our history of what is possible, because we don't even have that. We don't have a self-awareness. We don't have that self-awareness to understand what we are and who we are is great.
But Pencil is taking that on. Like Pencil took that on in Oregon. You're taking that on internationally. Like, talk a little bit about how you've operationalized that.
Well, I mean, ultimately, I'm celebrating who we are by bringing us out of the shadows, and making sure people understand someone who looks like you has done this. Where what we're trying to do ultimately is create a path that we never had before, and create that path by, in some ways, by honestly forcing the industry to pay attention to us, because if we don't force them, there's no way that we'll be undeniable. Up until this point, we've been denied. And so what I wanted to do, especially coming off of last year, was, all right, if you feel bad about it, all right, cool. Well, I'm gonna make you feel worse, but in a good way, right? Where you don't even understand how I'll take whatever funds you want to do to celebrate us, and then turn it back around to start planting these people within your organization that have the same mindset. And then they start to give back and they start to bring other kids in. But ultimately, that's how I see what we're doing with Pencil. Is we're just doing it on the design side of this industry, where what we're doing could be in multiple sectors. It's just we haven't collectively understood the importance of our power. Our power is very real. If we decided, if the Million Man March, if that Day of Atonement was really real, like if Black Friday was really real, what I mean by that is we decided not to buy anything for a week. You know how many businesses will go out of business? And those same businesses, they need to value us more than just being consumers. So what I'm ultimately really what we really want to do is, in a lack of better words, infiltrate the organizations and institutions utilizing their funding to do what's right, to do what's rightfully ours, to get what's rightfully ours, and that's knowledge and education, to be able to be a more productive kind of member of quote unquote society that they've created for us. But I want us to create our own networks, create our own societies. At some point, we'll start creating our own companies. And then when we start to understand we have that power, we're no longer waiting at that point. We're dictating. And to me, the disruptive piece, or the freedom that I feel, is being able to pick and choose who I want to work with. Mm-hmm. No more assholes. Done. Done with them. No more companies who don't care. Done with them. You know, being able to understand your value and then get paid for your value. We don't understand that. We don't understand our value. We don't understand our power. We don't understand the opportunity to say no to something we don't like, we don't want to do. Real power is being able to make those decisions comfortably without being afraid of what someone else is going to think or say or do associated with those decisions. So to me, like this is where I'm at now, where I've quote unquote did my time. And now my time is up, and now I'm just turning it all back around. I'm taking all the knowledge and insights and information that I've acquired and giving it back to the people that need it, because I didn't have it when I started. And that is really one of the bigger disconnects, is we start in a deficit. We don't start at the same starting line. We don't. If we start the same starting line, we'll dust everybody. Everybody. We're starting so far behind, we have to work so hard to even catch up to them. And hopefully you're not tired to the point where you can start to leave them behind. But sometimes it's hard being Black and brown. Like you know how hard it's been to be Black and brown the last like 18 months?
Yes.
Tiring. It is extremely tiring, but at the same time, the people before us,
Yeah.
they never complained. They had it way worse than what we had. So we got to just basically dust ourselves off and realize we're making these decisions and making these strides for the people that's after us and that we may never meet.
You know, Victor, Street Theory did something that I'm forever grateful for, which is you and four other artists trusted me enough to be willing to partner when we reopened the museum um, with this incredible mural, No Weapons Formed Against Thee Shall Prosper, which was in direct response to um, the many murders of Black people, particularly, I think it was at the wake of George Floyd's murder, Mr. Floyd's murder. But to be able to reopen the museum with that on our front lawn was, for me personally, I have to be honest, it was very personal. It was important to me for the city and for other people, but I have to say the moments when I saw people stop and look up, white people, Black people, kids, adults, um, and they all just would stop and reflect. There was not one negative, response. There was not. There was just a mutual understanding that it was a moment in time when we really needed to think about how to reconcile our history with our future, both as a museum, but also as a city, and then also just individually. And I don't know if I've ever properly thanked you for that, but um, really, thank you very much. All right, here we are, back again. Thanks everybody for joining us again tonight. That was actually fun to listen again to, especially Dwayne, who has gotten quite militant as he reaches into his older years. I didn't realize. I loved it. Everybody was so incredible. And we have an incredible question already lined up here. So we're happy to take questions in the Q&A chat. We are gonna hang out together for like 15 minutes, maybe a little longer if we get into something juicy. But let's start with this notion that like, what are we actually doing amongst ourselves? What are we doing to support each other? And do any of you have evidence of what that looks like when it's successful? And I actually am sitting here watching all of you thinking you all have examples. But maybe I will start with Vic, because I feel like you are in the middle of collaborations with other Black and Brown artists all of the time, and might have something to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, it's important to network. You know, don't isolate yourself and only work within a small circle of people or only work with your own people. You know, it's important to recognize who's out there, who's doing work that could benefit, you know, your organization or your crew and vice versa. So for us, it's important to work with, you know, artists that are of color that, you know, do photography, that do videography, that work on social media, that are designers, depending on what the project is. If we want to go, you know, like have a host curator, that also helps. So it's just important to expand your network, to know what your strengths are, know where you can use some help, because we all can use help. We can't do everything. So it's important to, you know, build people up. And, you know, when we work with artists, we don't just want to work with them and then be one and done. We actually want to mentor them, help them, you know, be independent, and someday they can, you know, curate their own shows, you know, teach them a little bit about the business, how they could sell their work or monetize what it is that they do, and also pass their contact along to other people that could possibly use their services. So yeah, I would say, you know, supporting each other by networking, and also giving each other projects that, you know, can make everybody look good.
Anyone else want to take a stab at that? What does it look like when we support each other?
So Makiba, yeah, I wanted to put a plug in for, you know, creating our own social networks, right? So I'm co-founder of Amplify Latinx, which is now a nonprofit, right? But it started as a movement to build economic and political power for Latinos in the Commonwealth. Before Amplify, it was a network for Latinas to help them advance into positions of power and influence. And what we created was this circle of support, like a sisterhood, right? For Latinas to be able to share with each other their challenges, the good, the bad, and support each other in their career, professional and personal journeys, right? So part of the work that that we evolved into was, how do we champion Latinas in particular to reach their aspirations? How do we create more visibility for them? And visibility is about building your social networks so that you can ultimately achieve what you want. And it also meant sharing those networks when we became more connected, right? So the more connected I got to people of influence, people that could open a door, right? Provide a job, get you on a board, get you into a program, or, you know, provide you with funding if you were a small business. Being able to share that and open those same doors for others, it becomes critically important. And that's what, you know, creating these networks of support is all about. And sometimes we have to do it for ourselves. We have to create our own, for our own, by our own, so that we could keep building our economic power and our influence. And, you know, I will say Amplify has had significant impact, right? In the political realm, we've encouraged people to run for office, and they are in office now. We're placing people onto boards, commissions, and working groups that are influencing policy, right? And we're collaborating with other community groups across the Commonwealth to advocate on policy together, and really moving towards a multiracial, you know, democratic platform that can advocate for policy change that advances more equitable outcomes for our residents in the Commonwealth. So just wanted to put that plug in, because it's really important that we also build our own networks for the issues that we want to advance.
Dwayne, what's gotten better? What does it look like in your industry because of people of color working together, or being collaborative, or mentoring?
I would say the first step is we realize we're not alone, where we're so separated and divided amongst brands, and we let the brands get in the way of us having conversations with each other, that we forget that, you know, we're not the only ones having trouble. We're not the only ones, you know, being, you know, overlooked. And so a few years ago, you know, we organized, it's called the African American Footwear Forum, where we just put out a note like, hey, if you're Black in the footwear industry, come hang out with us in DC for a few days. And we had over 350 people show up. And, you know, the power was, that was the first time any of us have ever walked into a room as a professional. We were not outnumbered. And the impact of that, just being in that room, the energy that was there, and these people came in as who they were, not what brand they represented, but who they were as people. And that really started the lower the wall. That started to open the doors for conversations to have. People met each other they've never met before in person, but they've seen their work, or they bought their work, right? Where it was really the first time we actually really had a chance to talk to other people that looked like us, that were in this industry. And since then, we've had a continuous dialogue virtually, obviously. And that dialogue has led to some people switching companies, some people starting scholarship funds, some people starting their own businesses. I mean, it just led to a lot of progress that was not there, because we were divided by our brands, and we let our brands get in the way of us being people first, and us having real conversations and relationships with people. So I would say that was probably one of the bigger ones. And then ultimately, we've always had a big network of adjunct professors that are nationwide, that work at these brands, and that just increased. And so being able to leverage folks to pick up a call or send a text and say, hey, I need you for an hour to jump on this call with me to talk to my class. Now that network is about 200 strong as well, where all we did was just talk to each other. Like, that's all we did, was actually just reach out to each other. And you'll be amazed what happens when you take the first step. And sometimes people are afraid. But if you if you owe like me and been in the industry long enough like me, then I guess people take your phone call or return your text, and then things happen.
But I love what you just said about, I really never thought about this, but like that we show up either as our brand or as our individual self. And like, you know, that's super powerful, right? I have to say that I see times in my career where I was absolutely showing up as the brand that I was representing. And now I do feel like I'm starting to transition into really just wanting to show up as a human being, right? To be a part of the solution. But I want to toss to you, I want you to speak to a response to the question, but also if you could find a way to weave in, I want to talk about giving circles. I want folks to understand what that looks like and why that's such a powerful tool in your portfolio.
You know, I think the giving circle question links to this quite well, because it's all about sponsorship, right? And sponsoring people with your social capital. Who are you with? Who's in your group? Who are you lending yourself to? And, you know, people think about not only brand as in their corporation, but brand as in their personal brand. What am I affiliated with? And when I think about this notion, as you were speaking of earlier, of coming together, giving circles offer a wonderful opportunity to express that, and particularly giving circles that are not just of friends, but people coming together that may not know each other, but they want to really affect something larger than themselves. Giving circles have been around since forever. You know, we have just now kind of coined this in the philanthropic world and thinking about this as something new. But, you know, I think about my great grandmother, and people came together to buy land together. People came together as co-ops. You know, we don't often talk about them as giving circles in the United States. Sometimes they were even outlawed, right? Because they said, oh, I don't know if anyone's from the South, oh, this is an airplane, or this is a way of people pooling their money together. That sometimes was seen as illegal, because people couldn't govern it, people couldn't control it. And then you have, you know, particularly new Americans talk about, in Black new Americans, oh, this is new, this is the way we do a susu, or this is the way that we pool our money together. I think that's a natural way of being. It's a natural way of creating a power, natural way of creating a cooperative, a natural way of saying, not only do we have the power to create our own, but fund our own, as Betty would say, for us and by us. So I'm so happy that giving circles are coming into their own, but also there's a little bit of a difficulty, if I may will, if I can talk about this for a moment, because it's still thought of who is legitimizing this giving circle. You know, is it the community foundation? You know, what is the fee around it? Is it a small giving circle? Where will it live? Who sponsors it? Whose brand is attached to it? And I think we do need to do a little bit more work of thinking about Giving Circle as a vehicle, a philanthropic vehicle of power that is community-based, community-centered, and can blossom in ways that even sometimes large dollars cannot. This is a great way of us coming together and looking across our communities to serve our communities in ways, collective ways that we talk about even in the tradition of Kwanzaa, that moves us forward in the spirit of Juneteenth and beyond.
Need to unmute, okay. Thanks, B. You know, I always think that we're talking to young people, and so I'm hoping that this will be rebroadcast and that young people will see this. So let's have a conversation with them for a minute, because we've talked about how bold we've all become in our years and our wisdom. But there was a moment in time, right, Betty, when you decided that you weren't going to be practicing law anymore. You were going to think about what it meant to be an entrepreneur. And I want to know if you were scared. And if you were, how did you work past that? And if you weren't, talk about how that manifested itself for you. And I'm going to ask every single one of you the same question, so feel free to think about that too.
Well, I will tell you, I waited almost 20 years to become an entrepreneur, the entrepreneur that I wanted to be. because I started my career as a lawyer. And that's probably one of the most risk adverse professions you can go into. All you do is protect against risk and you don't take a lot of risk. So, entrepreneurship is risky. It's about taking risks. It's about, I think, following your dreams and building, something that leaves a legacy ultimately. So I started a kids fitness business back in 2015. I was really passionate about fitness and passionate about the impact that fitness could have on youth. And the fact that in Boston, fitness and high quality physical activities were not available for kids. So I ultimately wanted to open a Ninja Warrior gym for families. Like, think about that. That's super cool, where you could design really amazing, challenging obstacles and doing it in a space where, both families and enthusiasts for obstacle races could do it together. Very expensive and high risk proposition. So the way I approached it was, you know what, this is really scary. I'm doing it late in my life. I don't want to risk my assets, right? The things that I worked so hard to build for. So I'm going to I gave myself 2 years. I said, if I can't achieve the goal that I want, which is to open this monstrous facility by then, I'm going to stop, especially if it's just not foreseeable. And so Makiba, this, you watched me build it. I started out doing classes in the park for kids. I laid out my, hoops and Ninja Warrior quad steps and all kinds of fun things in parks. And I proved that there was an interest, that there was a market, but I couldn't find the space, right? I couldn't find a place that was affordable. And again, it broke my heart that I couldn't launch it in the time frame that I wanted. And I actually did stop, right? I ultimately decided I'm not going to keep doing this. I think that's a viable concept at some day, but not right now. And so I went back into law. I still think it's possible, but let me tell you, I'm glad I didn't do it, because it would have been shut down and I would have been bankrupt because of COVID, right?
I know.
So, in retrospect, I don't know, maybe the universe was protecting something. But I would say, entrepreneurship is one of the best ways to unleash your passions and your creativity. And entrepreneurship is not just about for-profit businesses. It can also be social entrepreneurship. It's the nonprofits some of us have launched as well. So Amplify, and Latina Circle, those are also, for me, entrepreneurial ventures, right? They're just in the nonprofit space. So I have had some success, right, in some of these launches. And I think that, it's been an outlet to unleash the creativity that I can't otherwise unleash in law, right? And now in fund management, again, we could get creative there, but it's different when you're creating your own thing, right? Especially if you're a creator, an artist. And so what I would say is, I wish I hadn't waited so long. If I had the opportunity to do it earlier on, I would have. I just didn't have the mentors and role models to show me how to do that. And I would say today, there's so many programs, including like the one Dwayne's running, right, to get into the design business, the footwear business. There's so many opportunities to learn early on as a young person how to get into entrepreneurship. And there's many, many more supports to help entrepreneurs of color to launch their businesses and thrive. So I would say, if you want to take the risk, now's the time. Seek out supports, because they're here.
Vic, you walked away from a successful career in a corporate space. You had children, you had a family. I think you might have even had a mortgage. Scared? Excited?
Yeah, I'm fortunate to have such an incredible partner that has always supported me. Liza Quinones, who's also co-founder of Street Theory, our creative agency, was a big part of being able to make that transition. But speaking to younger people, because I don't want to talk about what that took or how that felt. I think it's for me, it's more important to talk about what it takes to get there, especially if you're young, because really you have to humble yourself tremendously, and you have to stay hungry, and you have to be open. And most importantly, the humble part becomes learning from failures, because I think a lot of people, they don't have the patience. They kind of want that instant gratification. I think that, we come from a generation where we didn't have the fortunate, instant gratification of likes on social media or people really validating you based on what you do or what you show. And I think a lot of that has a false pretense because validation really comes from within. And I think that people that really want to grow and want to be serious about their craft, they have to be willing to see the validation within themselves first by creating, by hustling, by working hard, by learning, and by humbling yourself and really working with people that are in the profession that you want to be in. And I know so many people that just want to kind of skip all of that and already be the man and already be, popping and doing all this cool stuff and showing at big galleries, but they haven't really put in the work or had, been behind the scenes to kind of see what it takes to even get there. So I would say that for us, there was definitely a lot of grassroots initiatives. There wasn't always, Rob Gibbs, super close friend of mine. We joke all the time saying that we painted, hundreds of walls for free, using ladders, whatever we could find. We would share paint. These were all like, projects that took a lot of sacrifice and a lot of humility to even get going. And you meet younger people now that the first thing they say is, well, who's going to pay for me? And it's like we had to like find a way to fund our own projects to learn the skill sets and to get to a certain level. And I think that if you're from a younger generation, you benefit by volunteering, by working with people that are already doing it and assisting them so you can learn, all these skill sets and grow versus like, oh, I want to be on your level already, but I've never painted a mural. So that's the humbling part of it. You know what I mean? It's like somebody telling Dwayne, I want to design the next Jordan, but I don't know how to make shoes.
That happens all the
You know,
time.
all the time. Yeah.
Bethia, Dwayne, either one of you want to take the next?
Ladies first.
Yeah, Wall Street, from Wall Street to the nonprofit sector.
Mhm.
What's that like?
You have to be open. And, I think Victor said it best. As I think about my younger self, and it's funny because I'm very fortunate that I had a great, great, great assistant who is kind of like flew the coop, right? She left the nest. And it kind of reminds me of myself at her age. She just moved to New York, and there's something about energy, right? That young energy of trying to figure it all out. And I think the thing that I would say, and I say it to her, and I would say to my younger self, and I would say to any young person, not only trust your gut, but find a way to really channel that nervous energy into something good and use it as a positive force in your life. And I think about, there's something to a healthy fear. I think fear, there's a reason you don't touch fire. There's a reason that the baby is hesitant. And I think knowing that everything is not going to be given to you and creating those internships, creating the space for you to succeed is one of the things that I would say to younger people. I think one of the things that I've seen, particularly here in Boston, because this is a highly resourced place, there's so much that is given to people that they stop seeking. And I think, when I talk to Ariel, the thing that I love about her, that she's constantly seeking, she's constantly interning. We talk about what is it she's looking for. And Victor, I'm so proud of her. She ended up working for free for people. She's writing articles. She recently got published in Essence, and, it looks great. Her name is there, but it was an internship that she did for free because she wanted to find a way to get that foot in. And I admire that so much in her at, 22, really kind of figuring that out. And I think that's something that sometimes we take away from kids, that hunger, that ability to figure it out, that ability to be a little afraid and say, keep going. And I think that's what I would try to help younger people understand, that sometimes fear is good, but it's what you do with that fear that makes all the difference in the world. Because even as an old person, I'm afraid sometimes, I'm gonna be honest, I'm a little
Yeah,
nervous.
you're not old.
Fear.
Nobody old on this Zoom.
But it's healthy. But how do we channel it and channel it right?
Beautiful. Dwayne, I'm going to have you be our last note. And so take it away.
I would say fear and haters are great.
Yes.
Got to have both of them because they motivate you from two different sides, right? But I would probably start with, dream bigger. Be more observant of what's around you. And then I would say ask more questions. Where when I was growing up, I just wanted to design sneakers. I never thought I would make it to the top of the sneaker design industry working with Jordan. I thought Nike was great, but I never imagined working with Jordan. And so I didn't dream big enough when I was younger. Observant from that point of view, like I grew up, maybe the young folks don't know this brand name before, but there's this cookie company called Famous Amos that was out many, many years ago. He was my neighbor growing up in Inglewood. To us, he was just the dude that had fresh cookies in the trunk of his car that he would give to us when he was on his way to his store, right? So we didn't add that up. Like we didn't realize that was what an entrepreneur was. And it was one door away from us, right? And then obviously we had other street entrepreneurs as well, which have highly skilled profession as well, and negotiating skills and selling skills. And then just asking questions, right? Like, don't take what people tell you, where when I was in high school and I figured out, I thought I figured out life. And I told my guidance counselor, hey, I want to be a footwear designer. Help me figure out how to make that happen. And she told me no Black kid from Inglewood would ever become a footwear designer. Like, okay, I could have taken that and hid into a corner and never touched it again. But that's where the hater part comes in at. You need people around you sometimes that don't want to see you be successful or don't want to help you or don't want to see you progress. Because, those are called chips, right? I still have a chip on my shoulder where you need chips. Sometimes those chips, man, sometimes those people who don't like you or don't want to see you do anything, they're probably the best thing for you. And I had that, and I'm sure other young kids will have that. And then the fear part, absolutely, you need that because that creates a different sense of urgency for you, especially as you get older and you have kids and you have mortgages and other bills and everything else. When I'd rather gamble on myself than gamble on someone else. So give me the ball, I'll take the last shot and I'll just deal with the consequences that come from it, good or bad, I'll do it. But most of the time, young folks are afraid. They're afraid to make a mistake. They're afraid of what people will say or think of them. And some of that is because of the social status that we have right now with social media and the likes and the friends and all these fake affirmations that they buy into, where I didn't have any of that. I just had the yellow pages and I had some haters and I didn't dream big enough. And to me, like if I got this far with no internet, our cell phones didn't even exist. Like we had brick phones, by the way. Like Google that. Like Google a brick phone. You will see you need help to carry that shit around. So like I didn't have that much. So what I like to tell kids is like if I had this and I got as far as I was able to get, and you have way more, like you have no excuse to even be halfway at where I am, if not well beyond, what I can even imagine. And I just think that, young folks just need to use the tools that they have around them because they have a lot more tools than they're aware of. It's just they don't know how to properly use them.
So be humble, earn your keep, find your way in, even if it means that you have to do some sweat equity. set some boundaries around how far you're going to experiment with your risk, and dream bigger, but also use everything to fuel you to move further, because it's all worthwhile. It's all good, is what I just got.
And you got to welcome the haters, Kiva. You got to
Welcome the haters. Welcome the haters. Come on, haters.
Invite them to get something to eat and make them pay for it.
That's right. I was on a panel earlier today before we close, and I will just share with you that Representative Byron Rushing was he's a very, and have mentors, and he's an incredible mentor to many of us here in this state. And he said something really interesting to me as it relates to Juneteenth. He said, it is so interesting that we like to think that these slaves were standing around waiting for somebody to come and tell them that they were free. He said, they were talking, they had their own network. They knew that they knew for the last 2 years. What they didn't have was the protection to leave the plantation until until that military came and offered them the sort of sanction to say, you can now leave, but they were already free. And I just say that to say, you know, as we're tying this back to this weekend, Saturday, or this year, or as Representative Rushing said, you know, the entire month of February, March, April, May, and June is what we really should take on as our moment of commemoration. But that's really what you all are saying also, like, we are here. We all have other folks that are around us that are helping us move through these spaces. It's not that we can't do it. It's not that we don't know what we are supposed to do. It's that we need blockers and tacklers, and we need people to lock arms with, but also folks to follow and folks to pull along. And so you all do that for me every day. And so I want to say thank you very much for being in my atmosphere of true liberation. I do feel like it's the friends that I have that offer me that freedom. So I wish you all a wonderful rest of the week and weekend, and keep it moving.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you,
everybody.
us.
Thanks, Mikiva.
All right. Good night,
Thanks
everyone.
everybody.
And thanks everyone for joining us who's here. We had a great number of participants. This will also get posted on our mfa.org, and I believe each of you may end up reposting. So if you have your own followers, they'll have access to this recorded version as well. All right, happy
Sounds good.
Juneteenth.
Happy Juneteenth. Thank you so much.
Right.